A very good evening to those of us joining here in Australia, and good morning to those of us who are joining us from Israel or elsewhere. My name is Alex Bahar-Fuchs, and I'm a senior research fellow in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Melbourne, and also a clinical neuropsychologist. I have the pleasure of welcoming you all to the third webinar in a series that my colleague Marcelo Magidman, who is also here, and I, from the board of the Australian Friends of University of Tel Aviv, have the pleasure of organizing on behalf of AFTAU. In the previous two webinars, we had the pleasure of hearing from leading researchers from Tel Aviv University on new frontiers in aging research and about the future of the banking sector. And we received some really great feedback from the community about these webinars and speakers. Tonight's webinar will no doubt be of huge interest to many members of our community, as it deals with anti-Semitism, a topic that I personally sometimes am amazed that is still relevant in 2021, but that sadly it's still very much alive and kicking around the world. To bring us up to date with the most advances in our understanding of anti-Semitism, we are absolutely honored to have Professor Dina Porat from Tel Aviv University, who very kindly and generously accepted our invitation to speak tonight. And we look forward to what will no doubt will be an enlightening lecture. We're also very fortunate to have today's webinar moderated by Mr. Jeremy Jones, who will be a very familiar name to many of you in the audience, and who kindly accepted me reaching out to him via LinkedIn, following Professor Porat's specific request to invite him. So thank you very much, Jeremy, again, for accepting this invitation.
My pleasure.
And it's my pleasure now to introduce Mr. Jeremy Jones, who is a member of the Order of Australia and the Director of the International and Community Affairs for the Australia, Israel and Jewish Affairs Council, a former president of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, the first Jewish Australian to be granted the Australian Human Rights Medal, and a prominent international writer and commentator on racism, interfaith dialogue, anti-Semitism, and multiculturalism. He is a senior contributing editor of the Australia-Israel Review, has researched, analyzed, and published on anti-Semitism for more than 30 years, and is a leading global Jewish figure in Jewish-Muslim and Jewish-Christian dialogue. Before I hand over to Jeremy to introduce Professor Porat, I'd like to take the opportunity to quickly thank members of the AFTAU board here in Melbourne for supporting this initiative again throughout this year, and in particular our president, Rosie Potasnik, marketing manager, Renee Spangin, and Jill Rosner, our liaison person in Tel Aviv, and all the support people here tonight for assisting with all the logistics. So thank you. And with that, I'm handing over to Jeremy. Thank you, Jeremy. It's for you now to introduce Professor Porat.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be asked to moderate tonight's event with the Australian Friends of Tel Aviv University. It was interesting in Alex's comments about the fact we're talking about anti-Semitism today. Who would have imagined some years ago? In 1992, I met Dina Porat at a conference on anti-Semitism in Brussels, where there were hundreds upon hundreds of presenters talking about the end of anti-Semitism, with no more Soviet Union, no more Cold War. And Dina Porat, Professor Yehuda Bauer, and a few others gathered about 10 or 15 of us in a room and said, they're all crazy. Anti-Semitism hasn't ended. We need to seriously study the phenomenon. We have to make sure somebody is keeping an eye on what is going on.
Thank you.
And that was the genesis of the Kantor Center for the Study of Contemporary European Jewry at Tel Aviv University, a group of people around the world who shared a concern that anti-Semitism needed to be properly monitored and analyzed if we were going to develop proper responses. Professor Porat was not only the former head of the Kantor Center for the Study of Contemporary European Jewry, but has served as the head of the Department of Jewish History of the Rosenberg School for Jewish Studies and the Alfred P. Slaner Chair in Anti-Semitism and Racism, all in Tel Aviv University. She has served as the chief historian at Yad Vashem since 2010. Professor Porat has been published very widely for many years And amongst those publications which have been highly awarded include the National Jewish Book Award for her biography of Abba Kovner and the Bahat Prize for her new book on Jewish revenge after World War II. She was Tel Aviv University's Faculty of Humanities Best Teacher for 2004, was awarded the Raoul Wallenberg Medal for 2012, and has been on prestigious lists such as the 50 leading Israeli scholars in Marca magazine and the 50 leading women in Israel in Forbes magazine. She has been a visiting professor in Harvard, Columbia, Venice, New York, and Hebrew universities, and has tutored over 30 MA and 20 PhD students. Her main research interests are contemporary and classic anti-Semitism, the history of the Holocaust, Zionism and the Jews of Europe, the final solution in Lithuania, and Jewish-Catholic relations since World War II. She has served as an expert on Israeli Foreign Ministry delegations to UN World Conferences and as the academic advisor of the International Task Force on Holocaust Remembrance, Education and Research, now IRA. The last paragraph is particularly relevant to tonight because 20 years ago, the United Nations held the World Conference Against Racism in Durban in South Africa. And Dina Porat was amongst the most important scholars there, trying to make sure that even in the most difficult of environments, those who seriously wanted to know what anti-Semitism was, what the problem was, had a great resource person at their disposal in Dina. But also, very recently, in Malmö in Sweden, the Australian Prime Minister announced that this country embraces the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism. Very topical, very much for tonight. And with that, it's my great pleasure to invite Professor Dina Porat to speak to us on Anti-Semitism 2021, Defined, Monitored and Tackled.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. I think that on top of all that has been said, we are friends and colleagues since 1992. Thank you really for this very generous introduction. And without further ado, as I was given about 45 minutes, which I think is an ideal frame of time, I will start right away with trying to share with you why I chose this topic. Because, as Jeremy has quite rightly said, and as Alex is amazed to see, anti-Semitism recently, and more so since the beginning of the coronavirus and its entrance, sudden outburst entrance into our lives, anti-Semitism is on the rise. It's more pernicious. There are places where it is more violent. It is rampant in the social media. It got many more arguments because of the corona. We are spreading it, Jews are spreading it, Israelis contriving it. We will get all richer because we'll find the vaccination and sell it, etc., etc. A whole line of new arguments. Then the murder of George Floyd brought more arguments. So if this is so, and if anti-Semitism is on the rise recently, and I'm sure you feel it as well, why choose a title such as Defined, Monitored, and Tackled? Because I would like to share with you that on the one hand, this is the situation of anti-Semitism, no doubt. But on the other, there is a lot being done, a lot still to be done, but a lot is being done. And I will start with defining, with the definition, and then go on to monitoring what is done in this area, what is not, and end with tackled. How is it today addressed by governments, by administrations, by NGOs, etc. So, regarding the definition, first of all, Jeremy, thank you for reminding us and mentioning this important achievement. Australia now joins many countries, more than 40 countries, that have already embraced and adopted the working definition of anti-Semitism. Now, why is this important and what is this definition good for? You see, the definition came into being in 2005. And why is that? The Durban Conference was mentioned, 2001. It was such an anti-Israeli, anti-Jewish tirade that it began a new phase in the long history of anti-Semitism, which we call today new anti-Semitism, now about 20, 21 years old. It is more violent, it is more led by Muslims, it is more into the social media, it has its characteristics. Anti-Semitism and violent anti-Semitism were since Durban on the rise. You needed to do something. 2004, in which the number of violent cases doubled in comparison to 2003, the German government, that always feels responsible, you know why, gathered a big conference, a large-scale conference in Berlin. And one of the decisions of the conference was we need a definition. Now, of course, you can open any lexicon and any encyclopedia and find there a definition of anti-Semitism, the way you find the definition for everything. But this time, the definition was not the work or the outcome of the effort of a scholar whom the encyclopedia commissioned or so. It was a joint effort because of the feeling that there is an urgency. And indeed, scholars, Jewish organizations, non-Jewish organizations, all contributed and corresponded among them under the leadership of the American Jewish Committee in Washington, and a definition came into being, and it was adopted in 2005 internationally by a big organization, the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Since then, it has been in the field. It has been on the website of a branch of the EU in Vienna. It has been translated to 20 languages and was online. It has been used to help in courts, to teach policemen when do they see and identify an anti-Semitic case, to teach in Jewish communities who needed a definition for their work. So it was there until we will not get into details, until it was taken off by this branch in Vienna. So efforts were renewed, and in 2016, May 2016, I can tell you in secret that it was exactly the 90th birthday of Yehuda Bauer. So we all gathered, dealt with his birthday and with the definition. The IHRA, International Holocaust Memorial Alliance, then numbering 31 countries, adopted the 2005 definition with a few adaptations, which I had the honor to be on a trio, 3 people who did these adaptations, small ones, because the definition is not to be changed. It was such an effort, you can perhaps add, but not change. It was such an effort to get so many Jewish scholars and organizations to agree that you don't change it. This is it. Now, what is its value today? Why is it important? And important, and Australia joined this, the countries? Because, first of all, the definition is a non-legally binding document. It is not a legal document that you can take and go to court and say, Your Honor, this person said this and that to me or hit me, etc., and I demand a punishment. I personally believe, and I think that there are many others who share my opinion, such as Professor, my friend Deborah Lipstadt in the United States, that it should not be a legal document. Because, you see, there are no definitions, for instance, for racism. There is no internationally accepted definition for racism. There is no definition for Islamophobia, being against the Muslims. There is a definition of anti-Semitism and of Holocaust denial, another one, and out of them came a new one, definition of anti-Gypsyism, when you are against the Roma, the Gypsy tribes. But on the whole, that's it. There are no more definitions. So, first of all, it makes the dealing with anti-Semitism a bit unique, because it does have a definition that other maladies, Islamophobia, Negrophobia, Christianophobia, homophobia, whatever you have today, do not have a definition. I think that if you make it a legal tool, it will turn against Jews, because it will say, aha, they control courts, they schlep people to trials, they punish because of anti-Semitism. I think that this is no good, that the situation and the use of the working definition today as it is to much better avail. It is much better used. It is, as we said, a short definition. It's just one page, not a problematic one. It does not deal with the questions. Back in 2004, we did not deal with the questions of who is a Jew, who is an anti-Semite, why is he an anti-Semite, what's the history of anti-Semitism. These are questions with no end. It is a practical one-page long short definition, and then come examples, 11 examples that I will refer to in a minute. And it says that it is a non-legally binding document. You can go with it to court where there are laws against anti-Semitism or denial or racism. You can, as we said, teach or train policemen. You can teach it in school. You can go with it to leaders, to NGOs, and ask them to act when these examples are breached and Jews are either hurt or insulted, etc. So it is very much in use. And I would like to tell you that right now we're in the Kantor Center in cooperation with a new organization called CAM, C-A-M, Combating Anti-Semitism, the headquarters of which is not far away from the university. Together, we monitored worldwide how many institutes, bodies, organizations adopted the definition so far since this May 2016. You will be amazed to know that we have crossed the 700 number, and we are going still on, because there are places. I will give an example, for instance, Bavaria. We mentioned 1, 2 in Bavaria in our first report on adoptions worldwide, and I get a mail from Bavaria Gewalt. We have some tens, dozens of places municipalities, schools, etc., ministries who adopted. And then comes Argentina and says our football teams, our association of football teams, they all adopted one after the other. And then came England and the UK and said 100 universities adopted that definition. I would like to emphasize that because this means, and I'm saying again, we are still going on. We did not finish the counting, and December, at the end of the year, we hope to come out with a more concrete number, but the number is growing. So what I'm saying is, please look at my title and at reality also from the positive side of what is being done. There is no other melody or evil on earth that got such a definition that is so widely adopted, which means international awareness, international recognition of a problem and of the need to solve it. I would also like to say that so far is so good. It is being used. It is a widely accepted as adoption, and not as confirmation or not as legal, but adoption, a recommendation. On the other hand, I have to tell you frankly, I'm sure you know that, I'm sure you are people who read and follow. What happened is that the more it got adopted and the more it entered reality in many places, the more it was attacked. And it has been, and it's still being attacked, especially in academic circles, turning to the left politically, mainly, who say that this definition is no good and should be replaced. And there are at least 3 other definitions written, especially one that calls in itself the Jerusalem Declaration, that would like to replace this definition. Now, on what grounds do they object? What is their problem, so to say? And the matter is the following. I promise to come back to the examples. Now, the definition is only 2 sentences. Anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews, which may be expressed as hatred, I would like to say hostility, toward Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jews or non-Jews. Why non-Jews? When the anti-Semite thinks he is a Jew, or their property toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. That's all, that's the definition. But then come 11 examples, out of which 7 deal with anti-Semitism, Holocaust denial, hitting Jews, harming them, insulting them, etc., etc. And then come 4 that say when anti-Zionism is anti-Semitic. Not always, of course not. And the definition says outright in its beginning, it says criticism of Israel similar to that leveled against any other country cannot be regarded as anti-Semitism. Of course not. It's criticism. But if it singles out Israel, if the way it is in the Human Rights Commission of the UN, every other day Israel is put on trial and gets some 100 reprimandations compared to 9 for Iran and 5 for Syria. It's like that. Singled out. When there is a use of Nazi terms and Nazi comparisons to Israel, then anti-Zionism is being expressed in anti-Semitic terms. Now, those who criticize the definition and want to replace it think that that these 4 examples, they say that there are more. I assure you there are 4. Perhaps we can argue about the 5th one. That because of that, mainly the definition is obsessed with defending Israel. It is not. It is a tool against anti-Semitism. And 4 examples are there because we saw in the Durban conference and later in the years later on how easily anti-Zionism, anti-Israelism is being used in harsh and insulting and unjust terms, and how it is in fact using anti-Semitic symbol, myths, etc. So there is a debate. Please take it into consideration. There is a debate. There will be a big conference organized by those who oppose the definition. But please also take into consideration, as we said, that it is being widely accepted, adopted, used, and there was an effort done by Professor Rosenfeld, our colleague in Indiana University, an effort to have academics sign support for the IRA working definition, and about 350 indeed signed and supported. So that's the situation. There is an ongoing advancement in adoption and in use. And on the other hand, we must say, or we must face it, that there is objection, though these objections and these 3 definitions that would like to replace the working definition do not have a political backing, do not have an organization behind them. They have good academics. We regret to say that we have seen many of our friends there, but they do not form an organization that can enhance or advance these other definitions. Okay, so this is one thing. It's defined, it's quite uniquely defined, and it is worldwide adopted. My second point is monitoring. Now, I would try to say to state what the situation is as far as we can say, and to point out a problem as I did with the first point. Now, since during the last 2 years, as Alex and Jeremy have quite rightly said, anti-Semitism is on the rise since the corona started, which means that we started seeing it not February 2020, March 2020, more incidents, more ugly caricatures, etc., etc. There was less violence because people were in a lockdown. And you know very well what a lockdown is. So now when the lockdowns are opened, violence is coming back. But during the corona, when possible or potential perpetrators were closed at home, there was less violence, but there was a lot more verbal and visual and verbal manifestations and expressions of anti-Semitism. Because of this situation, more institutes and bodies joined the arena of monitoring. And I can tell you that I started making a list because here was one more organization and a new organization like CAM. And there were older or more veteran organizations, but they took on the work of monitoring in addition to the former work. And so I have a list, you wouldn't believe it, of 16 bodies. And I'm sure I've missed 1 or 2, so let's say somewhere between 16 and 20 bodies who now, today, hoy en día, as we say in Spanish, today, are monitoring anti-Semitism. we try to collect them all in the Kantor Center, and we are falling off our feet because 2 of them send reports every week. Most of the others, once a month, once a month. The others have also every 3 months, which means a quarter of the year, and then a summary, and then reports, and then surveys. This arena is more active than it has been before, which means that Jewish organizations and non-Jewish organizations such as the EU under the leadership of Katharina von Schnurby, a non-Jewish German lady who is doing an excellent job, is monitoring anti-Semitism too, and has come up now with a strategy that I will speak about in my 3rd point, which means this arena is active. Jews are not passive. No one says, okay, let's lower our heads, it's a wave, let it pass us, and and it will be okay later. No, there is a lot of monitoring, a lot of attention, and a lot of reports being written and sent around. Now, as we said, we should definitely also see the problems. Now, there are problems in monitoring, there are problems, and I would like to share them with you, because let's say that indeed since 1994, Jeremy mentioned 1992 when we first started, but since 1994, there is a report, an annual report being written and published in Tel Aviv University. And it is published worldwide in a press conference. It gets attention. And it is, as I said, annual since in 1994, which means about 27 years. We cannot say, we never said that this report indeed covers incidents from all over the world. And I'm sure that despite the fact that we have now some 16 to 20 bodies monitoring, we again will not have the full picture. And why is that? We will not have the full picture because, first of all, there are parts of the world who are not interested. It's not, in anti-Semitism is not, and Jews are not on the plate. It's Black Africa, it's China, it's India, Japan to a lesser extent. There were a few years of very harsh publications, and other countries that, well, it's none of their interest. But there are cases there, and it is difficult to get to them. For instance, in India, because of the tension with the Muslims in India, it has also this tension implications on expressions against Jews. We don't have a full picture of these countries. Also, there is a lot of difference. You live in Australia. It's an organized country. It is technologically advanced, etc. Please take into consideration that most countries in the world are not. And if you compare what we get from Canada, Australia, the UK, the United States, South Africa too, these are organized communities with tools to monitor, and you can get a picture. But if you go eastward, for instance, to East Europe or to South America, Latin America, in many countries, technology is not that developed. There is no really a way or a body that, that collects what is happening, collects the incidents. Some Jewish communities are weak in number, in means, and regrettably, the corona has weakened many communities more than before, because you know that a community is based on the contributions of its members. If the members didn't come and contribute did not come physically, and the action and activities were halted, and contributions didn't come, and community life is not what it used to be, then this gathering of anti-Semitism or anti-Semitic cases is also not what it used to be. And so we cannot say there are huge areas in the former Soviet Union that we do not get real material or concrete material from. And so the picture varies. And when we say, let's say in the UK, it's on the rise. Okay, it is on the rise, it's true, and it's documented. But when you compare it to other countries, comparison is not full, because you do not have full material from other countries. And now to another problem, which is really, I would say, a very serious one. Jeremy is well aware of that. You know that every other year, a group of about 60 activists in the field and researchers meet either in Tel Aviv University or around it, and the other time in another country. Now, this year we met in En-Gedi, in kibbutz, on the Dead Sea shore. It was a hilarious seminar. And we are trying hard to find common categories according to which every community and every organization will count and categorize the incidents that they do get hands on. But, Kinderlach, I have to tell you, we did not succeed. We did not. Each country, each community, each organization, the ADL have their categories, World Jewish Congress have their categories. There are countries in which they are in touch, close touch with the police, like the UK, France, with the Ministry of the Interior, and Germany, and there the police and the ministries have their categories, and you have to take their numbers and compare to yours. So I regret to say, but there is no common category worldwide to be used by everyone. And I think that we should give up trying to look for it or trying to implement it, because that's it. Let's face it, that each community, each organization go their own way. And I can get the numbers from a country in which everything is put into the same basket. Violence, insults, social media, and there is a number of 1,500 cases. Another country goes according to the police, divides to violent and non-violent, etc. Another set of numbers. So getting the full picture from this point of view of how it is categorized is also not only difficult, it's simply not non-existent. And so you will ask me, and you will be right in asking me, okay, so how do you know it is on the rise, or it is coming down? Yes, because you look at each country and at each organization and what they send you. And you can compare each organization to what it sent you last year, and you see if it's on the rise or not. And from this point of view of comparing to former years in each place, by each community, organization, etc., it is on the rise. It is more is more malicious. The caricatures that we have seen during this pandemic are really outstanding in their ugliness. Even veteran researchers couldn't hold having a verkrimpte punim, as we say in Yiddish, a face of disgust of seeing that. Okay, so I shared with you the second point of monitoring. There is a monitoring. There is no silence, no passiveness. There is constant activity in the attempt to know what the situation is. But there are no definite concrete numbers from every country, and there is no common categorization. Okay, then you can ask to round up this second point. So what is the definition for if there is no common categorization? Of course, there is no categorization of types of violence, but the definition says violence in general, or of insults, or for social media. But the definition gives you the general framework in which these perpetrators of anti-Semitism are acting. Now, I'm coming, Alex, do not worry, I'm coming to my third point. And the third point is tackled. And I think that here you can really come with complaints against me. How do I say, or why do I say tackled when anti-Semitism is rampant? And it is not coming down, it's coming up. So what do you mean by being tackled? Indeed, there has been, if you look at the situation of what governments, administrations, NGOs, international bodies are doing, there is a lot more activity and attempts and budgets to combat anti-Semitism than ever before. And it is a bit amazing. Look at January 2020. You know, of course, that at the end of January 27th every year, since 2005, again connected to the Durban results, 2005, there is a holding of an International Holocaust Memorial Day, which was declared in 2005 by the UN. And it is a very active day. It is being held, last year, it was held in 114 countries, places, not always dedicated only to the Holocaust or even to the Holocaust at all. Each country takes this Holocaust business and compares it to its situation. In Senegal, for instance, in Senegal on the beach, there is this building from which the future slaves were sent from Africa to the US. And they show you the place, and they say, this is our Umschlagplatz, which is the place in the ghettos from which the Jews were sent to the death. So there is an International Holocaust Memorial Day being held every year in dozens of places. Now, in January 2020, in Yad Vashem, Jerusalem, came more than 55 delegations headed by prime ministers and presidents, from Putin to Prince Charles and the King of Belgium and the Queen of the Netherlands, and etc., etc. And they all pledged in writing. There is a book that combines their pledges now. They pledged to fight anti-Semitism. That was January 2020, and there were lots of hopes. Because what does a pledge to fight mean? It means budget for security. It means budget for education against racism and for knowing better Judaism, for legislation, etc., etc. But was Stuttgart, February, it was January. February, the corona started, and this effort was not followed, though it was a beautifully organized gathering to remember the Holocaust and to combat anti-Semitism. But it couldn't be followed, continued, etc., put into action. During the corona, administrations had other things on the mind, of course. Now, 2 weeks ago, there was a conference, an international conference in Malmö, Sweden. I was amazed. I went there, of course. We were a group of 12 experts who tried to advise to the organizers, but they went their own way, not an academic conference. They wanted the politicians, the heads of state, to come and to pledge. And indeed, they came. There were hundreds of people there and dozens of delegations, and each of them is giving now a pledge, a concrete pledge. How much money do I give for this, for that? And it is all being written down, and more so, Sweden, that has organized this conference, will be next year the chair of the IHRA, of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. And in this capacity, it will be able to follow which country gave which pledge and how does it fulfill it. So for the first time, there is a certain mechanism that would try to see how indeed pledges are being put to practical use and are not just lip service or beautiful words. Now I would like to end by asking you, Kinderlach, again. Isn't it amazing that dozens of delegations schlepped themselves to Sweden, and it is already quite cold over there, themselves to Sweden, to sit and hear each other and pledge to be active in the remembering the Holocaust and in combating anti-Semitism? I think it is a Jewish huge achievement. I'm not sure any other persecuted or harmed group has anything like that. In fact, I'm sure, look at the map, there isn't anything like that. So this is why I said take lead. There are bodies that do act and are active on the scene, and therefore I will end by saying again, anti-Semitism is on the rise. We should be active as much as we can, but it is defined and monitored and tackled. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dina. That was a wonderful presentation, and a number of questions come to me, and there were also questions that came in advance of the seminar and in chat. One area that some of the questioners would like you to address is where the United Nations fits into all of this. You did mention in terms of Holocaust Remembrance Day, but most of the activity you identified was through IHRA, the OSCE, and we also know what's happened with the Organization of American States, for example. Where does the United Nations come in, please?
Okay, I'll try to be brief because I understand there are more questions. Indeed, the United Nations is first of all active around this International Holocaust Memorial Day, as we said. It has a special committee that is called Outreach, and it is outreaching to countries, helping them to organize ceremonies, lectures, invite personalities, etc., for Holocaust Memorial Day. Also, I must say that in recent years, the General Secretary of the United Nations is Antonio Guterres from Portugal. And Antonio Guterres made it a point that he would tackle anti-Semitism and fight against it and not ignore it. And so he appointed, not only he himself is active, but he appointed a special envoy, Miguel Moratinos, formerly Foreign Minister of Spain. And this Miguel Moratinos is also very active in the field, so much so that in 2019, the special envoy of the EU on racism, matters of racism and discrimination, Ahmed Shahid, wrote and published a great historic report on anti-Semitism, spelling out mercilessly what it really is. The complaints that I have, of course, are against the human rights, the commission that calls itself Human Rights Commissions, and it is manned by Libya and Syria and Iran and Saudi Arabia, and etc., and there Israel is every other day being reprimanded, accused, etc. This is a sort of a ritual that we don't see the way out of.
Thank you, Dina. There was a question in the chat regarding what the EU is actually doing, what their detailed strategy is for addressing anti-Semitism. Are you able to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah. Well, as we said, Katharina von Schnurbein has been really active since 2015 and did a lot. And recently, a strategic plan was presented in Stockholm, in the conference in Stockholm, regarding combating anti-Semitism in the countries of the EU. It's not worldwide, it's the EU, but there are 28 countries, and the strategy looks for more budgets, more education. In education, they mean not only teaching about the Holocaust, but a very important point that they are emphasizing the EU, and this is enhancing Jewish life. And in this respect, teaching is about Judaism. Who are Jews? What's Jewry? What's Judaism? There is rampant ignorance. We Jews don't know much about Muslims about Christians about Jews. And so teaching, coming to know each other, and budgets for all practical activities, these are the two main lines or branches of this strategy. And they were very proud of their plan. They distributed it. It's at least some 100 pages long. Austria also has a 160 pages plan. So things are being done in Austria, Canada, under Erwin Kotler, now Stockholm. Yes.
Alex, your question.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'm just jumping in, Dina, with a quick question. In fact, I've got two, but you might only answer one for now. I'm interested in your thoughts about, given the kind of evolving nature of definitions of anti-Semitism, whether the case of untangling cases as either instances of anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism is any more complex now than it was, say, I don't know, 20 or 30 years ago. Can you give us your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would say that when we started working, this is really some almost 30 years ago, we are very careful to distinguish in the reports. And Jeremy knows we have discussed it in our seminars upside down, not to blame cases and expressions of anti-Zionism, not to blame them or label them as anti-Semitic. We said, okay, this is a political opinion. Okay, fine. And as such, it should be defined and stay as anti-Zionism, which is another brand. What is happening recently, since Durban, is that anti-Zionism is not just a polite or an academic or a political expression of an opinion. It has become much more than that in terms of using anti-Semitic myth, and anti-Semitic symbols, and language that is unbearable, and feelings of hate. And what we think is, Alex, that Israel is basically a Jewish state. 80%, we are 78% Jews, okay? 22 are either Arabs, Druze, Cherkess, Alawi, whatever, Bedouins. But we are 78, close to 7 million Jews. This is a Jewish country. And what happens is that the characteristics that were thought of about Jews are being put on the Jewish state because it is Jewish. And therefore, this distinction between Jews and Israelis, or the diaspora and Israel, the difference is being blared. They say you are one people. Of course we are one people. We agree, we want to be one people. So it's one people, it's a Jewish state with the same characteristics. And so you get more and more anti-Zionist expressions that are definitely anti-Semitic. Do I have a minute to give an example, Jeremy?
Go on.
Okay. I'm sure you all remember the Marmara Flotilla, this boat that tried to get to Gaza, pretending it's human rights and bringing, harboring peace and food and ta-ta-tam. Okay. Now, the Israeli Navy got on the ship because of information that it is filled with ammunition, sticks, stones, etc. There was a big fight, 7 people were killed, and there was a big international hoo-ha, and Israel had to apologize to Turkey, though I'm not sure there was much to apologize for. Now, there was a lot being written. If you say, I do not think it was a good idea for the Israeli Navy to board this ship, I agree with you. Many Israeli citizens agree with you, and we criticize our government, no matter which, from morning to night. And you said it was not a good idea. Okay, we agree, and this is criticism on the Israeli policy. But if you say, all right, and it has been written and said, that the murderers, Jewish soldiers, not Israeli, the murderers, Jewish soldiers, came, boarded the ship, intending to kill, and they were raised on the Bible, and there in the Bible they have a vengeful God. Ta-ta-tam, ta-ta-tam. This is not fair, or this is not fair criticism. This is absolutely using the case for anti-Semitism.
Thank you, Dina. We're running to the end of our time, but one final question, if I may. You mentioned at the beginning about the new anti-Semitism, with one of the features of the new anti-Semitism being the growing involvement in Islamist groups or Muslim groups in this.
Yes.
In the past couple of years, we have seen the Abraham Accords. We've seen changes of Israel's relations with a number of Muslim and Arab countries. And I was wondering if you are seeing any change in attitudes generally towards Israel because of this or any other positive developments. And also, is there anything optimistic you can tell us about your work at the moment?
Yeah. Okay, so I would like to thank you, Jeremy, for this question, because indeed I looked for something optimistic to end with, and I have here, right in front of me, I have news about the Global Imams Forum. There is a Global Imam Council, a body created in 2007. And this body adopted the definition, and it outlaws demonization of Israel. And it's a Global Imams Council. Also, I'm holding in my hand the Bahrain, where there is a big research center, Bahrain said, we are accepting that anti-Zionism is a form of anti-Semitism in Arab country. The Jews are a people, not just a religion, and that Israel is the nation state of the Jewish people. You read it and you say, the Messiah is already brushing up his white donkey. Yes, there is a change. There are expressions we have not dreamed of seeing in the Emirates. In Tunisia, a person who wanted relations with Israel, they almost killed him. But Morocco, Saudi Arabia are all on the way. We do see a change and we are optimists. What I was speaking about was not coming from the Middle East. It was coming from rightists in the United States, for instance, from rightists, neo-Nazis, etc. But in the Middle East, I do see a change. And yes, I think we should end by saying that this international involvement of countries and these many pledges, dozens of pledges, and the very coming of delegations to Stockholm to participate in something in favor of the Jewish people, I think, I hope, we all hope that it is the beginning of some change. Our job is to make this meet the street from where anti-Semitism comes from.
Thank you. It is now my pleasure to invite Rosie Potasnik, the President of Australian Friends of Tel Aviv University in Victoria, to bring this webinar's proceedings to a conclusion. Rosie.
Thank you. I'd like to personally thank Jeremy Jones and Dina Porat for coming and joining us and speaking at this webinar tonight. Their high standards lifts the university and the presence of AFTAL Victoria. I thought that Dina's involvement with the Kantor Centre really needed support, and therefore at this last moment I've decided to set up a fundraising to create a scholarship from the Kantor Centre, which actually is part of their purpose is the study of contemporary European Jewry, providing an academic framework for the interdisciplinary research of European Jewry from the end of World War II until the present day. I think the work that Dina has been referring to, the definition of anti-Semitism and all the organisations from all the countries studying it, helps to take us to a better place. And therefore, I would like very much to support the AFTAL creating a scholarship at the Kantor Centre. At the end of this evening, I'm going to make sure that there is a link available for people to make a donation and give a contribution to show that we are really needing these sort of research and support of students at the university. I'd like to thank everyone for joining tonight, and I wish you well. Be safe.
Thank you so much, Rosie. I think this is a very nice surprise. And I can tell you that such a scholarship for a young researcher will be put to very good use.
Thank you. I hope we can raise the funds for it. We'll do whatever we can.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the work you are doing for the university in general. Thank you very much.
Our pleasure. Ta-da.
Thank you, Professor Porat. It was lovely to hear you speak tonight.
Thank you, Jeremy. Be well. Thank you all. Be healthy, take care, and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Regards from Tel Aviv.
Thank you.